I'll be talking about federalism and how it's been recently affected from the rising tensions between Canada and the US. And before diving into this, I need to preface what exactly federalism is. In Canada, federalism is a system of government in which there is a division of powers between provincial and federal governments. These powers were formally written into the Constitution Act of 1867 under sections 91 and 92. In federalism, there is no single authority. This means that provincial and federal governments have different responsibilities. In particular, the provincial government deals with province-specific rules, such as natural resources, property rights, and education. On the other hand, the federal government deals with national-wide issues and rules. They are in charge of trade, communication regulation, international relations, and national defense. Now, delving into the recent issues between Canada and the US, there has been a recent rise in international tensions between Canada and the US. These tensions are causing provinces to assert their autonomy to protect local issues. This is important, however, it ultimately interferes with federal responsibilities, and conflicts such as these allow people to question Ottawa's negotiating powers, since the federal government is located in Ottawa. This raises a question on whether a new approach for provincial acts in intense times like these needs to be evaluated. Recently, Donald Trump has been imposing tariffs on its biggest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. His motives for this are likely deficits from the CUSMA Free Trade Agreement. The provincial and federal government have been responding in different ways in response to this. For example, the federal government has imposed retaliatory tariffs on steel, aluminum, automobiles, and the now removed consumer goods. Provinces, on the other hand, have been responding in different ways, such as Canadian-only policies and liquor bans. There's also been more controversial ways. For instance, on October 20th, 2025, the Ontario government launched a $75 million project for an ad campaign. This ad campaign featured the voice of 40th US President Ronald Reagan. His voiceover ultimately contradicts Donald Trump's actions currently today. Ronald Reagan was known for advocating for free trade, and this ad stirred up controversies between Canada and the US. Of course, Donald Trump sometimes acts a little bit controversially. He accused Canada of twisting Ronald Reagan's words and basically saying that the ad was fraudulent. Because of this, he implied totally cutting off trade with Canada as a whole. This was a big issue. Currently, Doug Ford has removed the advertisement to continue negotiations with Donald Trump. This was just the recent examples of a province taking a huge step of asserting their autonomy. Although this advertisement did a great job of quote-unquote waking up the Democrats and highlighting Ronald Reagan's prior views, it was a huge risk taken by the Premier of Ottawa. This is especially risky when Donald Trump is in office. This step caused Donald Trump to act in an unreasonable manner, with talks of cutting free trade completely between Canada and the US. And his spontaneous manner only demonstrates that provinces should stray away from major actions such as these, because they inherently affect the federal government and the national image. Because of the big steps of the provincial government, the federal government had to deal with the consequences. And this would have been different if all the provinces were fully unified in this decision. Not everyone was in favor of the Premier's actions. The two major political parties in Canada, the Conservatives and Liberals, had opposing views on this. Liberals more so agreed with this ad, and Conservatives disagreed with this ad. This is another disadvantage, as it divided Canadian views and weakened Ottawa's negotiating power and image. This is not the only time that provinces have acted independently. An example of this is the Manitoba egg case. Provinces like Quebec and Ottawa passed laws scheming to essentially limit the distribution of egg and chicken products to other provinces. This obviously negatively affected other provinces, one of which was Manitoba. In turn, Manitoba tried to pass a law much like theirs. They tried to regulate egg products within their own province and in other provinces, hoping to get turned down. This was deemed unconstitutional due to interprovincial trade. This set precedent of constitutional restrictions of provinces dealing with provincial-only issues. not international, and not interprovincial issues. Some people may disagree with my approach. Some may argue that there shouldn't be limits at all for provinces in situations involving tariffs, as they directly impact each province differently. They also affect some provinces more than others. Provinces know their needs and their economies the best, while the federal government goes off national averages. They argue that limiting provinces decreases federal accountability and risks the federal government abusing power. There is also a counter-argument that the federal government cannot take into account all issues for each provinces. Some examples of this are their specific groups that have specific needs, which provinces know more about. Some professionals even say that it is almost impossible for the federal government to act without input from provinces. These counter-arguments highlight key factors to uphold Canadian accountability. However, it is still important for provincial governments to address their concerns to the federal government in a more private way. It is important for provinces to address their concerns to the federal government. However, there should be a better and more private tool for this, rather than provinces asserting their autonomy like the Doug Ford ad. Another important point that should be considered is that social media wasn't yet invented when the Constitution was written in 1867. This is important because Premier Doug Ford's strategy of using ads and social media to spread a message couldn't have been predicted in the Constitution. Along with this, Donald Trump's reactions to this wouldn't have spread as fast as it can now, and may have had less of an impact. Also, to expand on the point of provincial leaders participating in risky actions, there is a possibility that Premier Doug Ford used this ad to attract national and international attention to boost his personal political image. Of course, it is common sense that political actions are often more strategic, but the public views them on a surface level basis. Allowing such actions can lead to more provinces interfering with federal issues for provincial economic benefit. A re-evaluation of modern issues like this need to occur. National credibility could suffer if no action is taken into account, since Canada would have more internal problems to deal with. Canada must modernize the way that the federal and provincial governments work together to prevent further risk. This would strengthen Canadian unity and would also hold the federal government accountable. Also, since the federal government manages the national economic policies, future independent and risky actions from provinces could allow for short-term benefits for the provinces themselves, but it could cause long-term detriments such as a loss of credibility for the nationwide. There are also issues with supporting provincial activism. For example, premiers could be asserting autonomy for their own political gain. Managing the division of federal and provincial powers could be difficult, even with clear limits from the Constitution. This is because there is much overlap between the recent issues of international tensions. It is important to allow provinces' issues to be told, with future reasonable limitations and minimal risks. Although these recent tensions have sparked debates throughout the country, each issue acts as a new learning point for Canada to improve its federalism. Not everyone is in favor of the Premier's actions. For example, the two major parties in Canada, Not everyone was in favor of the Premier's actions. For example, the two major parties in Canada, the Conservatives and the Liberals, had split views. Liberals more so agreed with the ad, and Conservatives disagreed with the ad. This shows how this ad divided Canada's views and weakened Ottawa's negotiating powers, as Canada did not act as a unified nation. Its interactions between Canada and the US have led provinces to act on their own. This raises a question on whether Canada needs to change how the federal and the provincial governments cooperate. When provinces act alone, the federal government loses some of its strength in its negotiations. In conclusion, Canada would more so benefit on private negotiations and a more unified plan when it comes to these tensions.